listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast. I'm so excited today to bring you the story of the Everlasting Tree School. I'm having a conversation with one of the founders, Amy Bomberry. Hey, Amy.
There you go.
So great to have you here. This is going to be really fun because Amy and I know each other and have met at the Taproot teacher training, but I don't know the whole story of the school. So the Everlasting Tree School is a Waldorf-Inspired Mohawk immersion school, and that Amy helped to found. So that's what we're going to be hearing about today. And let's go ahead and get started. I'm first going to introduce Amy, and then we're going to have a conversation about this journey. This is great. So Amy Bomberry is a Mohawk Turtle Clan from 6 nations of the Grand River. She is the mother of 6, a teacher, and a holistic healing practitioner. Amy is the co-founder of the Everlasting Tree School, a Mohawk immersion Waldorf-inspired school, where she's also a classroom teacher and faculty chair. Amy has been actively learning Mohawk for over 20 years as a second language to ensure her children know their language, culture, and history. Amy also serves on the board of directors for the Douglas Cardinal Foundation for Indigenous Waldorf Education. So welcome, Amy. So great to have you here today.
Sego sewa gwego wat gwenu palado, gasanoja ni yungets, Kanyen'keha ni wago wenjodo, dafne waganyato, oswego ni diwageno, skatne wa agwali wasernuni ne skolon hizet goa, yayak ni hari wagi liwayan, or yayak ni hari wagik sadayam, that new, skolon hizet goa jinue kele hanyanis. So, hi, everyone. My name is Amy Bomberry, and like Jean just introduced me, like I'm Mohawk Turtle Clan, or Kanyen'keha is what we call ourselves. And I'm really excited to be here and thankful for the opportunity to reconnect with you, Jean. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, but it's been nice to stay connected through social media over the years. And I always keep up what's happening with Taproot.
Yeah, this is great. So you're going to hear, listeners, you'll hear about this thread and each of our journeys as we go on in this episode here. But you know what? I just want to start with the parenting journey, right? So you have 6 kids. I have 3 kids. And I know that on your parenting journey, you've experienced a variety of educational approaches and that sort of thing. So before we get into the founding of the Everlasting Tree School, let's just talk about, as a parent and teacher, before you decided to found the school, what was your kind of philosophy of education or your experience with different educational settings?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to share my own educational experience growing up. And that is really what has propelled me into actively pursuing something or creating something different for my children, and not just my children, but, all of our children. Like, it's for the future of our nation that our children are strong in who they are as Kanyen'keha, and that they know their their history and their culture and their language, because all of the wisdom of who we are is contained within that identity, particularly the language. So that's really important to me. And so it was my own experience in realizing that what I experienced as a child, even though I had some really wonderful teachers, the system that I was educated in was not okay with me. And I really wanted to be the change I wanted to see. And so when I was younger, I went to school here on the reserve at Six Nations. And so for those that don't know, Six Nations of the Grand River is located in so-called Southern Ontario in Canada, or Canada as you know it. So being born and raised here, I had no idea what it meant to be Ongwehome or a Kanyen'keha person until I went to university. And to me, it was like absolutely unacceptable as a parent. And growing up, I did have Mohawk as a second language. And I was actually really, really fortunate to have one of a language teacher by the name of Khadija Howie or Ruth Isaacs. And she was instrumental in like revitalizing language here within our community way back in like the 70s and 80s. So I was fortunate enough to have her as a teacher. And so her being like a first language fluent speaker, I was able to hear that as a child, even though it was like maybe once a week or once every 10 days. I can't remember like what the schedule was, but she was covering, 2 or 3 schools and all the classes. So she had to fit us all in there like a half hour a week if we were lucky. So I really enjoyed her classes and her stories. So I did get a little bit of a foundation about like some of our stories and our teachings, but it was quite limited. And by the time I went to grade 7, there was no more language. They'd actually started to bring in French to be taught in our middle school grades to prepare us for high school, because we were going to have to take it in high school. So during that time, as I was growing up, there's also a very strong group of parents who started our first immersion school. And so that's like nearly 35 to 40 years ago they started, and it was called the First Language Academy. So the parents then were really, a group of parents at that time came together, and they've always been a big inspiration for, what the work that we do, because they came together and they pushed back and they like decided that that system that was of education that was available wasn't enough, because they wanted the language and culture. And so when that came to be, I was already like in grade 5, 6, like, so it was like they were starting in kindergarten, and I didn't grow up with the language and culture other than that experience at the school. So I really had no idea what I was missing. Like I had like one thing I did have is some very strong family support. Like I grew up with both sets of my grandparents are very much a part of my life. My aunties were like a really big part of my life. So we still have those like strong family connections and foundations. That is one thing that colonization hasn't that's not the case for everyone though. So I was very lucky to have that. But so it wasn't until I went to university and I was a young parent at the time, I decided to take Indigenous studies classes, because I believe it was within the year prior or only a couple of years prior, they started an Indigenous studies program and they were offering courses. And so I was taking those like as my electives, and I started to learn about our history, and I was absolutely like, it was gut wrenching. I was just devastated to find the truth out of the things that had happened to our people, like the residential schools, the displacement. Like my people, actually, we come from New York State. So we were displaced during the American Revolution, and we find ourselves, we're up here in Southern Ontario and Grand River. And, like there was just so much. And I was just like, I went through this like really deep periods of grief. So I had to commute to school, and it's Hamilton, Ontario, where the university is about 30 minutes away. So I would drive home and I would cry all the way home, because I was just like flabbergasted that,
Oh, I
I had
bet.
no
Shocked.
idea about
Yeah.
that. So it was
Yeah.
a huge grieving. And then I got angry. And I was angry at everyone. I was angry at like the systems. I was just angry, like, that no one in particular, just that everything, that how could this happen? Like, how are we still doing this? And then also in those Indigenous studies classes, I had the opportunity to have guest speakers who were like elders and knowledge keepers who came in, and they shared a lot of teachings. And so that really started my journey. And I didn't know at the time that it was starting something really like this amazing journey that I've been on. That's really when it started, is setting me on a new path. And so it was at that time, I remember listening to them talk about how, so one of them said, we have to be the change we want to see. And I just really took that to heart, that if I wanted something different for my children, then I was going to have to be a part of that. Like I wasn't going to like just wait for change to happen. Like I want something different. And so,
and what an amazing intersection where as a young adult, you're finding out so much about your people and the history at the same time that you're bringing, new life into the world. And that always ignites, right, us kind of reviewing our own past and our own upbringing and our own education, right? And thinking through like, well, how can I be that change? I love that quote. How can I be the change that I want to see in the world? So, wow, that must have been a very intense time in your life.
It really was. Like it was a very dark time. Like I went through like I said, the anger and the depression, and I was just really, really broken. It was a really difficult time. And so like I was basically in survival mode, just coping. And but it was my son that, he kept me going. He was the why at that time, because I was determined that he would not have that same experience, and that if I allowed him to grow up and have the same experience as me, the only person I could blame was myself.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing? I mean, I want to talk a little more about the journey too, but then to fast forward to the discovery of the Waldorf approach, because I'm over and over again so taken by the healing nature, right? I mean, that was Steiner's original intent. He was trying to bring healing to his country after a world war. And he was really focused on social and economic healing at the time. And I've seen over and over again in families and communities how much bringing these lively arts and stories, so many stories and culture, like true cultural, experiences to our kids, how it can be a very healing journey, a very healing approach. Yeah.
I think it was that healing approach is what captivated me when I did find Waldorf. And so I was teaching, so this is fast forward after my degree, after my getting my teacher certification. I was teaching, and I had 4 young children at that time. So I now had 4, and I was still trying to learn my language. So I had been through adult immersion. My second child, my daughter, was born Kennedy, who you know.
Oh, yes. So Kennedy, I had the privilege of teaching Kennedy an online class in high school, which was just such a joy. So that's actually, had you been to Taproot yet at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
You spoke about that, teaching that class while I was at Taproot.
Okay. Oh, right.
Why I was so like interested in it, and I was able to connect Kennedy and have her be a part of that class. So
that was a beautiful thing. Those of you listening, my dear friend Allison, she and I have taught a lot of workshops together at Taproot, and she and I both love literature and history. And so we created an online course for teenagers. It was just a one-time thing. We're not still doing it, but it was such a joy. It was around The Giver, the book series, starting with the Giver, and it was just so wonderful. So, okay, so you had 4 children at this point, and we're talking about, and you were teaching.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my children were really, really young, and I actually started when not only my youngest was. He was only 2 months old, I think, when I started to teach. And so my husband actually was able to take a parental leave to stay at home and support us through that so that I could continue to breastfeed. And I was only part-time, but there was such a teacher shortage. I got recruited and I decided to teach. I just felt like as much as I wanted to be home with my son, and like my other two, my daughters were still younger at the time, and I felt this like a responsibility, or I just,
A
so
call.
I did it. And yes, this call, and so my husband supported me to do that. And we were really fortunate for that, because we lived only a few minutes from the school, and he used to bring the baby to me. And luckily I'd be able to feed him before I went. And then he'd come at recess time or break time, and I'd feed him again. And then he was still sleeping a lot. So then I'd get home at lunchtime, and then I was with him after that. But it was really hard to balance the demands of, holding a class, and then, balancing that time with my children, and especially my baby.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I had a really similar experience. So I went back to teaching when my little one was still breastfeeding, and it was so hard, right? I mean, even when you have it all managed, and somebody brings the baby to you and all of that, it's still a lot.
It was tough. So at that time, like I was still like really struggling, like very overwhelmed still, like since I was a teenager, and then like it really was triggered in that time in university. Like I've had ongoing mental health challenges, like mainly like depression. So I kept slipping back into that. And so I started to my healing journey. And around the same time, I also met another mom who she was the one that introduced me to Waldorf. She was a parent. Our daughters were in the same class at the school that I was teaching at. So yes, because I think she was in JK. So I put my daughter in JK, and her daughter was in SK. So that's how we met. And we started having conversations. And I didn't mention that previously, like all while my son was little, like I was always, since that time when he was a baby and I was in university, my mom and my aunt and my cousin, we were always talking about doing something different in terms of education. Like, what do we do? But we really had no clue what we were going to do. So for me, it was going to teach. I thought that's my calling, to teach, to do my part, to, do whatever I can to help be, just to be a part of the change. And so then I met my friend Chandra Miracle, who's also one of our co-founders at that time. And she started to talk to me about Waldorf. She shared some articles and resources, and she was just telling me like what she knew about it. And it turned out that not long after it really piqued my interest. So we were talking more about it. And not long after that, she told me about an open house at the Toronto Waldorf School. And she said, well, why don't we just go in so you can see it? We can take a look at, And I walked into that school, and I don't think I've looked back. And she tells me like my jaw literally hit the floor. Like I was just walking around just in awe, like, oh my God, like this is what this is what I didn't know I needed, or this is what I didn't know I wanted. And it was just that I felt that healing energy. Like the energy was just so different, and like the presence of the teachers and the way face was just so calm and beautiful. And I was just like absolutely captivated by that. And so
Mm-hmm.
meanwhile, at the same time, my second daughter, Sydney, she was in I think junior kindergarten is what they call it here. So
Mm-hmm.
or JK. So she actually had to start when she was 3 years old because her
Oh.
birthday's in October. So she started junior kindergarten as a 3-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
She went in, she turned 4 in there, but at the time, like I really didn't know a whole lot of the importance of child development, even though I knew I wanted this different experience. There was just so many things that I still didn't know of, like the importance of, protecting their childhood. And like, but anyhow, she was at school and she was really, really struggling. And
Mm.
she was like the child that my husband would try to carry her into school, and she's like sticking her arms and legs out trying to grab on whatever she can because she did not want to be there. And
Mm-hmm.
she just really, really struggled. And so when we went to so I was really concerned about her because I was thinking, like it didn't dawn on me that the reason why she was struggling is because she wasn't ready and she was too young to be at school.
Developmental view, like, oh, right.
I mean, obviously that's just like so obvious right now, but at the time, like I was just thinking, oh my gosh, if we have to force her into school every day, then she's gonna end up like in needing extra resource help, or she's going to be labeled as like, I was just like so
Right.
fearful of all the potential labels of what could possibly happen because she was just not, doing well in that type of a setting. So I, after we went to that open house at Toronto Waldorf, I started looking into what else I could do. And we ended up commuting to Halton Waldorf, which is a bit closer to us. It was a 45-minute drive. And so they had a 2 and 3 day options. And so we were able to get our children into that program, and we commuted. We took turns between the families of driving her. So she actually, with the exception of that brief, I think she was almost there for all of JK. So she finished the end of it at Halton Waldorf, and then she was able to go to kindergarten at Toronto Waldorf because we moved to Toronto because I went back to school to take the healing practitioner program.
Oh,
Because
wow.
part of my own personal healing was, doing some of these trainings, and it was more of the intention of just healing myself because, managing and dealing with the depression, because I was really concerned about, what my children were seeing when I was always sad, just overwhelmed and out of balance. And so like the healing practitioner program that I did was really about healing myself.
Yeah.
And so I was just this holistic healing. It was just all brought everything together. And then this Waldorf offering this healing education, and it just all started to come together in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So then you decided to found a school. So that's a pretty big undertaking too, right? So we met. I'm curious where you were when you came to the Taproot teacher training. I remember you came with your mom,
yes.
and to learn about the Waldorf approach. And had you just opened the school, or you were about to open the school?
It was already open.
It was open.
It opened in 2010.
2010. Okay. So
Yeah.
the Everlasting Tree School opened in 2010, and then you came to the summer Taproot teacher training. It's wonderful how it has come full circle, because now Amy is joining the Taproot team of presenters this year in 2021, and creating a workshop called Waldorf-Inspired Learning in a Mohawk Immersion Classroom, adopting the Waldorf curriculum to meet your family or community's needs, which is going to be just a wonderful workshop to help all of you, all the listeners, everyone really bring it's about customizing, right? Bringing Waldorf to your own family and community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the beginning, of the school.
Okay. So we started in 2010, and we actually started more like a homeschooling collective.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning, when we weren't sure, like, what it was gonna look like or what we were doing, but the group of us that came together, there was around 8 to 10 of us, I think, in the beginning, of like co-founders or people that were at the table planning and meeting and trying to figure this out. And we actually came together. It was more of a shared passion for our language and creating a space where our children could learn our language and culture in a natural setting rather than in a classroom. So that's where the shared passion came from, and how the school evolved was that the group of parents that came together for the language. And a couple of us were more so inspired by Waldorf, and then there was other, like, Montessori inspirations, and homeschooling, a lot of different things. Like, we were, unschooling too is a big part of it. So everyone brought different ideas to the table, and we came together like as a homeschooling collective. It was we were able to get sponsors and donations. We had to fundraise just to be able to pay our teachers. That's all we did. So it was a homeschooling collective, but it was the parents were supporting two of the other parents who were teachers to be able to teach in the classroom.
Okay.
And so I was like a parent, but also I was, at one point, I was like an assistant in one of the classrooms. And then I was doing, some of the planning and organization and trying to help grow and develop. And then we just eventually decided, yes, we're going full on and we're going to do a school, and things were like growing and evolving. People, like, we parted ways with some parents and some co-founders. And so, like, the group is very different now today than it was in 2010. But, that early group and that early foundation, like, I don't think I would have gotten involved if it wasn't for that group of people.
Yeah.
So even though some of them aren't a part of this anymore, like, their part in this journey is so significant, because it was, that collective group and those minds and hearts that came together that really, it fueled me and inspired me for my part.
Yes.
So when I found my way to Taproot, I had one of our teachers that we had at that time had taken a leave. So I went in to fill in for 2 months in a grade 5, 4 or 5. The children were in grade 4 or 5. So I went into, and I hadn't taught since 2006. So this was like about 2014. Like, I was like more homeschooling and focused on language learning and the healing. And so I was, and the more the admin and growth of the school, I thought that I was done with teaching.
That seems to happen. That's a common experience for many of us.
So there was no one else. Like, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so I went into the classroom and I taught. And it was really important to me because it was my son's class at the time. And I wanted to, I felt like, like, it was just like coming full circle almost for me, because I started teaching like when he was like a little baby. And one of the reasons why I did it, I was like, I wanted him to be able to speak our language. And so then when we find, our teachers, like, in having a medical issue, like, we really needed to support her in the class. So I stepped in to do that. And so that was a short term, just a couple of months, but I got to go to the Greek Olympics with them. So
that's such a
lot of fun. And we got to be a part of I think it's through OSNA, the Great Lakes schools. So to Aurora, Waldorf School over in near Buffalo. So that was really, really great. And so then it started to like kind of open my eyes to like the possibilities of teaching. And then a new grade 1 classes coming in, and we didn't really have a teacher lined up. And so I was going in to take that grade 1 class on when I went to Taproot.
Yeah. And what an amazing intersection, like these sort of rivers of experience, right? Where you have your parenting experience and your homeschooling, and getting together with other homeschoolers. And then you have this commitment to your language and culture and all of the eye-opening experiences you had as an individual, plus the healing, right, piece that it brought up. And then the Waldorf approach. So there they are, right? All coming together for you and your family and your community in this everlasting tree school. So at Taproot, you met others. I know oftentimes folks who come to Taproot are mostly homeschoolers, but many are also inspired to get together with a group, like form a group, right, of homeschoolers. I know that was my own experience when my kids were younger too, because the closest Waldorf school for us was a 45-minute drive. And so we created this little homeschooling co-op here too. So what was your experience at Taproot? Like, did you have some key takeaways from that or meet other individuals there? And how did that, what did you take back with you to the school?
Okay. So one of the biggest takeaways though, or maybe the most interesting connections, because one day I think I'll write a blog post or maybe a book about all of these just crazy connections and how this thread has all weaved through like this entire journey. So me finding my way to Taproot, it was just meant to be. Joseph Brandt, who actually like was one of our leaders at the time of the American Revolution, was actually key in leading our people to 6 Nations of the Grand River. So the nearest town is called Brantford. Mm-hmm. Joseph Brandt was born in the Cuyahoga Valley.
Oh my gosh, which is where we held the Taproot teacher training, the live event. Hopefully we will get back to that next year, right? In-person event. And where the Taproot teacher training was held that year at an environmental center in the Cuyahoga Valley in Ohio.
So it was, I think it was our hike one morning. We had went out on a hike on one of the days, and we were hiking along that. Is it a river that runs through there? The Cuyahoga, is it the river?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We were hiking along there, and leading up into this, I was still thinking like, I can't do this. I haven't taught, like I have like, there's just all these things like this fear and these excuses and things that I was trying to tell myself. And then when we were walking, my mom, I believe, was the one that brought that up and reminded me that Joseph Brandt had been born along this river and in this area. And I think that just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, immediately knew like, this is destiny. Like, this is so much bigger. I mean, there was lots of steps along the way where like, it was just like unbelievable, where I just had to like get out of my own way and accept that this was so much bigger than me, that this was a calling that, the ancestors were, working behind us 100% to, help all of these pieces fall into place. And so when she reminded me of that, and, I've always believed that there are no coincidences, but, to be reminded of that and to be in that place. And so I remember walking along that trail that we were on, and those trees were just so big and beautiful and ancient. And I remember standing next to one and wanting to know what they had to tell me. Ancestors had, they had lived there. They had been in that area that was, part of, our hunting grounds and traditional territories where our people had, lived. And so that was a really powerful experience. I loved the workshops, the hands-on workshops, Barbara's math workshop. Those were so many. There were so many just practical ideas and inspiration that I needed, and I think that's what I took away the most, because I was so afraid of like, I don't know how to do these things. Like, I still really struggle with some aspects of Waldorf teaching, because I feel like just a lot of fears
Yeah.
and things that I and just
You know,
not comfortable with.
I have this funny line that I used to say. I used to tell Barbara this. Barbara Dewey is one of my mentors, and she's the one who actually created the Taproot teacher training, right? And then I came along as a presenter very early on. And one of the things I would say to her is, I just have this fantasy that I wish I could freeze my kids, right, for 5 years or so I could go off and learn some of these very hands-on approaches to teaching, because I'd been a classroom teacher too, right? But I had brought stories and handwork and movement games and music and poetry and all of that into everything that I taught. So I just wish that I could freeze my kids and then come back and I maybe could do okay.
I think I've had similar hopes where like I think about that a lot now, where it's like I just really wish I could go back and redo some of the things, like, so that I could, give my children a different experience. And
yeah. But they see us striving, right? They see us striving for sure. And that is, I really believe what you said, that this is bigger than what we see. It's often, right, our efforts and our vision. Like, you have such vision for this school and your community and your nation. That is heartwarming to me. Beautiful thing. So the school, tell us about the school today, the Everlasting Tree School.
Well, the school has grown immensely since today. It's really it's different because of the COVID situation, and we've had to do a lot of online work, and teaching online is not ideal in any way, shape, or form when it comes to immersion, for one thing. So our kids are not getting the contact hours that they need for immersion. Our teachers are doing the best that they can to still deliver the language and the curriculum. On top of that, being on the reserve and rural, like, our access to services is much different. So our internet is terrible, and we live in an area where we still have like some old Californian or Carolinian forest growth. So we have a lot of trees, and so we're really blessed to have a lot of those trees and the woods that are still all around us. But it makes online very difficult because of the internet access. So we have families that don't have internet at their homes, so they're just in like in a dead zone. So there's several pockets of like just dead areas where the internet isn't the greatest. So it's made it really challenging. There's teachers that are in that boat as well, myself included. So at the beginning of the year, like, trying to hold the class through Zoom was a nightmare, because if my internet wasn't working, then someone else's wasn't. So then there was no kids on, and
and then to teach hands-on, with a hands-on approach, it's very difficult, right?
It was. And so us being independent, we could have actually opened, but we have a very high population of elderly people. So there was a community-wide, I guess the community sort of came together and like united in like the desire to protect our elders. Like, we need to keep our elders safe. So all the rest of the schools were actually like shut down. They made the decision that they were done until January. We attempted to go back a couple of times, but then the cases would rise as we were going. So our kids actually did spend 3 weeks in end of November, early December. We were able to do 3 to 4 weeks of back in class hands-on, and we had set up outdoor classrooms. So they spent a lot of that time outside. And then in January, I think they were able to go back for possibly a week or two. And then we've been sort of back on lockdown again. And Ontario right now is under lockdown again. So we just for continuity and consistency within the community, we're following the community plan, because there is a community plan for managing cases
and staying safe, and
staying safe. Yes. So when Six Nations, or like our community, is in lockdown, then we're not in class, but we have, our staff has grown too. So in the grade staff, I've actually been on leave for a part of the year because I was hospitalized in November. I had to take a medical leave, non-COVID, but I was very sick, and I needed to take some time. So it caught up to me, like juggling everything. And so I had to take a little bit of a break. So we have there's 4 main lesson teachers, and we had a teaching assistant and a tutor, like escort. So we have one individual on our staff who's working with a specific child to be able to support the child and the teacher to make sure they're met. And our early childhood had grown to 2 classes. So we had a younger class and then the kindergarten class, and we had 2 teachers in each of those. And we now have 2 trained Waldorf teachers. So one, our lead early childhood teacher is graduated from the early childhood program at the Toronto Waldorf School, or Rudolf Steiner Center, last year, I believe. And so she did that part-time while carrying her class and learning along the way. And then we have one of our main lesson teachers, Longhouse, is he did his Waldorf teacher training through the Rudolf Steiner Center in Toronto as well. So like, it is starting to grow. We have a number of teachers and staff and founders that have taken the foundation studies now, and we do a lot of different training. Last year, our grade staff did the Taproot. So did the workshops at a distance, and have the resources. So we have always encouraged, even though we're more like a school and we sometimes have the bigger classes, we still adapt and use the homeschooling resources a lot, because we have mixed ages. And so,
and I find that it's so helpful. Taproot and all kinds of other homeschooling resources are helpful for these small initiatives, right? And small community schools. And it's a beautiful thing, because I think it also infuses a lot of that bigger picture vision, energy, right? Brings that to homeschoolers who sometimes feel isolated at home. So it's nice to make all of those connections. And the approach is the approach, right? Like, it can be that's one of the things I love about Waldorf, is that it can thrive in so many different settings, from homeschooling to schools. So there are other schools like the Everlasting Tree School. Yes?
No.
Okay.
Ours is the only one. Ours is the only one. So there is another, like the original immersion school. So it's a Mohawk and a Kanyen'keha immersion. So they have both Kanyen'keha and Mohawk, and it's one school, but it offers they're 2 different like sections, I guess. So they are focused on language and culture, and they've been in operation now for like going on 40 years.
Oh, wow.
So some of their teachers have, they have taken some Waldorf inspirations to incorporate into their teaching. And then through the Douglas Cardinal Foundation, which actually came to be, I believe, in about 2015 to 2016 as well. We went to a training with a fellow by the name of James Bryan, who's actually the director at the Rudolf Steiner Center in Toronto. And he did a 1-week Waldorf teacher training, and he found out about us, and he invited us. And so we also were there along with some teachers from other Mohawk communities. So we all went to Ottawa. We did a week-long training with him, and there was, and how that came to be, I believe, is there was a parent who was Cree living in Ottawa at the time, and she had her children in Waldorf.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just craving that, like that more natural or that holistic and healing type of education, and not wanting to have her small child in a mainstream school in the city, because they were, living in Ottawa. And so she had, I don't remember how she had sought out or found Waldorf, but that she was a Waldorf parent. So they were really they were talking and starting to think about, how those aspects of nurturing like the spirit and like the mind, body, and spirit of the child is so similar to, our beliefs and understanding, and how we care for ourselves could be really beneficial for other Indigenous communities. And so somehow they found out about us, and they reached out to us, and we did the training together. And from there, then the Indigenous Education or Douglas Cardinal Foundation for Indigenous Waldorf Education involved from there. So they're actually working with some nations in Alberta as well, and some of the Mohawk, other Mohawk schools that are in our area have also, we've been working with them, and sharing what we're doing, sharing what each other is doing, doing some presentations to help them to everyone's curious about what it is about Waldorf that inspires us. So like we have that. Because sometimes people think, isn't that Christian?
Isn't that interesting? It's so true. And then you'll find Christians all along the spectrum some of whom don't resonate with Waldorf also. So it's, all over the map really. And this reminds me of the conversations about bringing the Waldorf approach to public schools, right? There's sort of this parallel where when I first started with homeschooling, I went to a training that was because homeschooling was not really accepted as a movement, right, within the larger Waldorf movement. And there was a training for public school teachers, a week-long training to bring more Waldorf approaches into their public school classrooms. And it's similar in that we're, the goal was really to encourage more hands-on learning and more focus on child development and more of the lively arts into the lessons. And that is good, right? In many different settings. So that's so interesting. So let's just wrap up with some suggestions. I'm wondering what encouragement you would have for others who want to customize the curriculum for their own, cultural background, whatever that may be, for their community or their family at home. Like what suggestions would you have for that journey? It is certainly a long journey, isn't it? It's a lifetime, really, journey.
What to say? I know that everyone like receives it different. And I think for me, like when I found the curriculum and had the experience, like it just resonated so deeply that I was able to see like the big picture and like the possibilities, but it's always hard for me to share like one or two specific little things. So I think that, what we've done is we looked at the Waldorf curriculum, and we look at the underlying, like the whys of what is this trying to teach. So it's not about the content for us. It's looking at the whys and how that meets the child development. So delving more into child development and looking at your child's needs, their mind, body, and spirit at that time. And what we've done is we've started to, examine more of our stories and our cultural teachings, and how can we nurture this place of development in the child using our own stories and our history and our culture. And so that's what we do. We look at the underlying why and the spirituality of why Steiner gave those indications.
And match that Yeah,
Yeah.
to the child, the individual child or children and child development. It's kind of that. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to put it. Because I think we all need to do that no matter what setting we're in, right? A homeschool setting or a classroom setting or a co-op setting, is to really see the why behind what this can bring, what this kind of, I like to look at it like what this opens up for the child, right?
Mhm.
What this invites in the child's mind, body, and spirit.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I think that for me, my daughter Sydney, um, she just graduated from high school in the fall time. So she's not sure what she wants to do. It will be something like artistic, but through Waldorf, she was able to uncover and deepen some skills. She's very artistic, so she's like a visual artist. She's into baking. She makes movies. Like she just has this, like such an artistic call to
Hmm.
express herself in so many different ways. But she's very shy and introverted. So in our schools here in our community, like when she was younger, there was no, and I think not long after I moved through elementary school, music and art and everything was all but, they took out the home ec,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
shop, all of the music. It was all taken out because our children were not, were consistently showing that our children were significantly behind
Mm.
back to high
Right.
school.
So then they think, right, we just have to
Take out
focus.
all the fluffy stuff,
Right.
and we'll make sure they're getting all these academics, but
Yeah.
not realizing it was those things that, that bring out their gifts and nurture their spirit.
Yeah.
And so like I am really grateful that, I was able to give, or she had that experience to be
Hmm.
in Waldorf, because I'm not sure that she would have uncovered those gifts had she not,
Yeah.
or had she not had the opportunity. So she also, they had music in through Waldorf as well. So now she's like, she plays the piano, like it's just all on her own. Like she's just doing her own thing, but she has been able to tap into some of her gifts that I'm not sure that she would have discovered had I not taken her.
Yes.
So I had to make the choice between keeping her within our community or giving her that experience. And it remains to be seen what the verdict is, and I'll leave that up to her.
Right.
But I do think that, she has tapped into, you
Mhm.
know, some of her.
Yeah, and that's, to me, what education is all about is us helping our children discover their gifts and then find
Yes.
ways to go out in the world and share those gifts. And what a beautiful thing that you are contributing to in the world to give your the children of your nation, your people's nation, that opportunity, right, as well as a foundation in their culture and language. Oh, it's just really quite a beautiful story. So thank you so much for sharing it. Tell our listeners where they can find out more about the Everlasting Trees School or connect with you.
Okay. So the school is on Instagram and on Facebook. Our website is currently under construction, but the school it's on Facebook. It's under Kanyen'keha, the Everlasting Tree School, but so you can just search the Everlasting Tree School and we're there. And on
Mhm.
Instagram, we're at Everlasting Tree.
Beautiful. And I'll put those links in the show notes. So, listeners, you can check out the show notes for this episode at artofhomeschooling.com/episode 32.
Mhm.
And this has just been such a great conversation. And I think the the closing message that I want listeners to hear is that as homeschoolers or in any setting, right? Um, in a community school, in a co-op, that Waldorf has such potential for multicultural stories in particular, but activities, hands-on, engaging activities, brought through the lively arts and the matched up with child development and brought in a way that is coupled with rhythm, so that children can really have this head, heart, and hands experience no matter what community or culture or setting you or your family might be celebrating. Right. And so really in any family, in any community, this curriculum, this approach has the potential to enrich that, whatever it is, enrich, your foundational culture, and in your case, Amy, and your people's community, to bring the culture and language immersion as a big part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been just a really wonderful, wonderful conversation about education and parenting and decisions we make and our true calling, right? Like we are embracing our own gifts as well. And you certainly have a gift you had a vision and you brought it to life in the Everlasting Tree School and for your entire community.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I'm very grateful to be a part of that. And I always like to just remind, like, one day I do want to write a book about it, because like I'm so fascinated for all of our stories of all the people involved, how we all intersected and our experiences woven in and out through the years. And it's just incredible to think about how, the ancestors have, been guiding us all along. And
all along. Oh, so beautiful. And if you're listening to this in the spring, summer of 2021, come join us for Taproot 2021, where Amy is going to be presenting a workshop all about the language immersion classroom in a Mohawk Nation. So we'd love to have you join us for that. artofhomeschooling.com/Taproot 2021. You can find out more, and there'll be a link in the show notes too. So Amy, thank you again. This has been just a great conversation, and I look forward to more in the future.
Yeah, Jean, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Yeah. That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.